I've got some wine. I've got some cheese. Let's take a whimsical trip to Paris with Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass. Today I'm talking about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which is coming to theaters on July 15th, 2022. It is a lovely, whimsical film about a British housekeeper who gets a strange dream and goes to Paris to fulfill it. So my hot take is I think you should watch it. Look, at some points it's a little bit too sweet, but overall it is just a heartwarming story with some ups and downs, some drama, a really great performance by Lesley Manville, and just an overall comforting film. So I'm going to tell you a little more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then go into this ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in this. If you don't want to know what happens at the end of this movie, I would turn it off at the ending section. You can listen up until that point. I'll keep it vague. When I get to the ending section, there will be some spoilers. So in Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, you have Mrs. Harris, who is a British housekeeper who is just kind of trying to survive. Her husband went to the war and never came back. She is just kind of continuing her life and is a little bit stuck in a rut. She's very good at what she does, but she just, her life is just a routine and she is looking for something new. And one day, one of the houses that she's cleaning, the lady, the madam of the house, lady of the house, has a new Christian Dior dress that she bought for 500 pounds. And that is an insane sum in the 1950s when this is set. But Mrs. Harris, it like strikes a fire in Mrs. Harris, and she wants that same thing. She wants the beauty, the exclusivity, just kind of like that life that Dior dress would mean. And she wants to feel kind of that feeling that the Dior dress is giving her. So she scrimps and saves to try to get enough to go to Paris, get her own Christian Dior dress. Does she do it? I don't know. We'll have to find out. So things I liked about this movie. The first is Lesley Manville. I mean, she plays Mrs. Harris. She plays the title character, and her performance is just very good. It's very endearing. It's very kind of lovely. She has just a nice, I don't know, dry sense of humor, dry British sense of humor. She has just a very kind of heartwarming performance, and she's someone that you want to root for. Lesley Manville does a great job of creating Mrs. Harris and portraying Mrs. Harris, and really gets the audience behind her. Like, it's a movie about pursuing your dreams. If you're not rooting for the main character, you're not really going to enjoy it. And a lot of that is because of Lesley Manville's performance. The second thing I really loved is the whimsical humor. I mean, doesn't have many like laugh out loud moments, but there is just a lot of things that are going to make you smile. Some little asides, some jokes, some culture comments that are just going to make you kind of chuckle. And it is just, like I said, a heartwarming experience. And part of that is just the very nice humor in this movie. The third thing I loved is just the sweet story. I mean, this is kind of, I would call it like a comfort food type of movie. This is a movie where you're just going to be enjoying the film and enjoying the experience. You're going to enjoy her struggle and how she like goes about getting to her dream. You're going to enjoy her dream and whether or not she's able to make it to Paris and do what she needs to do. This is just such a sweet story, such a heartwarming story. It has so many little touches in there where people are kind to each other, people think about each other. And maybe that is just something that we need in our current time. And the last thing I really loved is the music. It's a movie that is kind of about the grandeur of Paris and the dream of going to Paris, and the music fits. Like it has a whimsical humor, but also has a kind of a whimsical musical style that helps to sell the idea that Mrs. Harris wants to go to Paris. It helps to kind of like set the tone, keep everyone happy, keep everything lighthearted, and it adds a lot. Like it adds a lot to the overall style. It adds a lot to the overall story. So things I didn't love as much. The first, look, I said I like the sweet story, and I did. But there were a few times when the story was a little bit too sweet. I'll call it like too saccharine. It felt like there were instances when people were just like overtly super nice to Mrs. Harris for unclear reasons. And look, like I know you need that to sell this story, but it did feel like a little bit, I don't know, the story's kind of unrealistic, but it did feel a little bit too unrealistic when people were kind of going out of their way to help this person that maybe they didn't know, or maybe they didn't know that well. And the second thing I didn't love is there's just some very convenient plot pieces to kind of sell the story and kind of let Mrs. Harris go on her journey. There are some instances where there are some very obvious solutions that Mrs. Harris is the one that has to kind of push everything forward, through her gumption and her, can-do attitude. She pushes through these very, very obvious solutions. So again, nothing too bad, nothing that really affected my overall enjoyment of the film, because I did really like this film, but just some things that I was like, that feels like maybe they're pulling out the heartstrings a little bit too much. So now going into the ending, and this is where I will highlight some of those things that were maybe a little bit too convenient. But as you can imagine, if I highlight those and if I highlight the ending, there will be spoilers. So if you don't want to know what happens in this film, turn it off now. You're going to be spoiled. Turn it off now. So Does Mrs. Harris get to Paris? Well, yes, she eventually does get to Paris. There are a series of convenient instances that all come together to give her enough money to make her trip to Paris happen. She needed, I think it was 560 pounds, 500 pounds for the dress, and then 60 pounds for the travel. And she eventually gets it. So she goes to Paris. So she's in Paris, and she's like, okay, I'm just going to the Christian Dior store and buy a dress, as you might expect. Unfortunately, in this world, the Dior is a very exclusive place, and she can't just go up and get it. She eventually forces her way into the house of Dior, and basically is like, look, my money's as good as everyone else, and plops her money on the table. And you find out that Dior is very interested in this because they're having some cash problems. So they reluctantly agree to let her get a dress. She makes friends with a Marquis who takes a liking to her attitude and invites her to be his guest to this Dior show. So she makes it to the show. It's beautiful, it's lovely, it's enchanting, and she finally finds the dress that she wants. Unfortunately for her, someone else doesn't really love her specific character and decides to buy that dress out from under her. And when this person gets that dress, she has an agreement that it is going to be exclusive to her. So Mrs. Harris can't get her dress, but she gets another lovely one. It's a very nice dress, but it's not the one that she really wanted. Now, throughout this period, she has to go to Dior to get fitted, to kind of have it be custom made just for her. And while she's doing that, she stays in Paris. She makes friends with people. She makes friends with people at the Dior shop. A lot of the workers really kind of fall in love with her because of just how, outspoken she is and how kind of she's pursuing her dreams. But eventually, the kind of financial troubles of Dior catch up. And while they are getting close to finishing her dress, the House of Dior makes the call to, I guess, fire a bunch of the seamstresses, which is strange because this is a luxurious brand, but I guess they don't have the cash flow. So they fire a bunch of the seamstresses. And when this happens, Mrs. Harris is like, no, we are going to, gather around. We're going to go on strike. And she gathers all the workers in this establishment to go to Christian Dior's office. And I don't know, I guess demand their jobs. Who knows? They all gather, they all go into a line, they get to the office. It's not like violent, but they're pushing their way through. They are not taking no from anyone. They get to the office. So she barges in with Claudine, who has been kind of the person running Dior. She is trying to kind of keep the mystique and the exclusivity of Dior. And then you also have Mr. Fauvel, who is he is the assistant to Mr. Dior. He runs a lot about the shop. He kind of knows the business very, very well. So they are all in this room, and Mrs. Harris is there, and you expected to demand that they, keep the workers. But she says, and now it's time for Mr. Fauvel to say how to save the company. Fauvel launches in this very quick speech about how, Dior is all about exclusivity, but the world is changing and they need to, go global. Before, people would come to Dior, but now Dior has to go to people, and so they have to make affordable things that people like Mrs. Harris can afford. And this amazing idea of we should sell more stuff to get more cash. Mr. Dior likes this idea. Mr. Dior and Mr. Fauvel talk for about 10 minutes about it. And Mr. Fauvel comes out and delivers the good news to everyone, saying, well, we are going to expand, and we'll not only need all of you, we will need many more people. And everyone cheers. Yay, everything's happy. But again, this seems like a very, obvious idea. Maybe it's obvious from my perspective. It wasn't obvious back in the days. Who knows? But again, it felt like a very strange situation where Mrs. Harris had to be the driving force for this very, very obvious solution. Anyways, because of this, everyone's happy. They finish Mrs. Harris's dress, and she goes back to Britain. She loves her life in Paris. She had to be there for I think a few weeks while they were fitting her and getting her dress prepped. Now she has her dress. She goes back home. And when she gets back, she has changed. She really loved her time in Paris. She loved kind of this dream that she was pursuing. Her trip to Paris kind of woke something up in her. And now she's back in Britain, back to her life. And on the first night, one of her clients that she cleans for, Pamela Penrose, is also an aspiring actor. And she has a crisis because she is going to meet this director. She has nothing to wear. And what is she going to do? And while I was watching this, I was writing, oh, no, you're not going to. But Mrs. Harris offers her dress to Miss Penrose to wear to the premiere. And I was like, no, don't do that. Mrs. Harris hasn't even worn it out yet. and Miss Penrose wears it. It looks great on her. You know, it's a beautiful dress. And she goes off to the premiere, and it's raining. I was like, no, it's raining. Why would you do that? She goes off. Mrs. Harris continues her life. A few days later, she goes to clean Miss Penrose's house and sees the dress destroyed. And I guess, you know, there's a note saying, you know, I'm sorry about the dress, but you'll be happy to know I wasn't hurt. I'm going to sue the restaurant or whatever. And what happened was Miss Penrose was at this meeting, this dinner, this gathering, and she leaned over near an open flame, and the dress caught fire, and like the fire spread up the dress. Someone threw some water on her, so she was fine, but the dress was ruined. And Ms. Harris is understandably distraught about this. She, for some reason, she goes to this bridge where she kind of, I don't know, talks to her late husband. It's where she's had a few kind of like life choices and a few conversations with her late husband. He doesn't show up. It's not like a weird ghost movie, but you know, she kind of is contemplating life, and for some reason she throws the dress over. I thought that was a little weird too. I figured that she could, I don't know, ship it back to Paris, maybe try to repair it herself. She could have done something to try to save the dress, but she just throws it over. I think it's her kind of symbolically kind of throwing away her dream. Like she did everything she could. She did everything right. She got the dress. She lent it to a friend who was in need, and everything turned out horribly. So she's a little distraught. She's a little downtrodden by this. But later, there's a knock on her door, and a package arrives. It's a large dress-sized package that comes in along with some roses. And she opens up the package, and wouldn't you know it, it is a beautiful Christian Dior package. She opens it up and reads the note, and it is a lovely note from all of her friends in Paris, basically saying, we read about the story, we instantly recognized the dress as yours, and you know, we were so heartbroken by this, so heartbroken that the dress had been destroyed. But wouldn't you know it, the person that bought the dress that you really loved, her husband was arrested for stealing from the government, and all of her assets were seized. And so she couldn't make the final payment on the dress. We thought it was only fitting that we modify it for you. Apparently the fire story of the dress going up in flames had gotten them a lot of publicity, had gotten them more sales. And so they thought they would repay her by modifying the dress for her, and then sending it along with some flowers from some of her friends that she made in Paris. So, you know, it is a lovely scene. You find out some of the things that happen. You find out that that Claudine, who was, you know, very outspoken about wanting to stay private, is now the president of Dior, which makes sense. She kind of knows the organization very well. You also find out that Mr. Fauvel and Natasha, who was a Dior model slash personality, she was kind of the face of Dior, but she had a lot more about her life that she wanted. She didn't want to just be kind of a pretty face. She had an interest in philosophy. She wanted to learn. She wanted to kind of grow as a person, and she's finally able to do that. She is now kind of pursuing that dream and dating Mr. Fauvel, so everything's working out for her. And the Marquis, who had some missteps when he and Mrs. Harris were becoming friends, sent some flowers, you know, to kind of show his appreciation of her. So everything works out well. Miss Harris gets a dress. Dior is doing great. Again, like I said, the story is lovely, and it is beautiful, and it is a very happy, heartwarming story. A little bit too convenient, but you know what? It's fine. So what do you think Mrs. Harris would do now that she has a dress? She puts it on and heads out to a bar to meet up with some of her friends. And when she's there, she sees her best friend Vi and this guy Archie, who has been very kind to her, very lovely person, but has not, you know, has always kind of liked her but used her to pursue other people. I guess with this dress, he finally sees how beautiful she is, and they have a dance. Again, a little bit too convenient, a little bit too saccharine, but he sees her, she sees him, they have a dance. Her dreams are coming true. She has her dress. She might be finding love, and everything works out. Like I said, very sweet story, very lovely story, very, very convenient plot twist. But you know what? Sometimes that's what we need these days. And so that is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. It's coming to theaters on July 15th, 2022. It's just a heartwarming story. You know, go in expecting to kind of smile and feel good about it, and you'll enjoy it. So thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you, and au revoir.